My cousin Angela said it like she was doing me a favor. Like she was simply naming a fact that everyone in the room already knew, and the kindest thing she could do was say it plainly, so we could all stop pretending otherwise. You're security staff, Marcus. That's all you'll ever be. And honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. She smiled when she said it. That was the part that stayed with me. Not the words. The smile. The easy, unconcerned smile of someone who has never once considered that they might be wrong about a person. The room didn't go quiet. That would have at least acknowledged something. The room just kept going. My aunt laughed at something my uncle said. My mother looked at her plate. My brother Kevin nodded slowly, the way he does when he agrees with something but wants plausible deniability. I took a sip of water. I didn't say anything. I never say anything. My name is Marcus Webb. I am 38 years old. I live in a clean, unremarkable apartment in a city I am not going to name. I drive a 4-year-old sedan that I keep meticulously maintained because in my line of work, reliability is not optional. I don't wear my job to family gatherings. I don't talk about it over dinner. I don't correct people when they form conclusions based on incomplete information. I learned a long time ago that the most dangerous thing a person in my position can do is be interesting. My family knows I work in federal security. That's what I told them 12 years ago when I took the position, and that's all I've ever said. To them, this means I stand at a metal detector somewhere wearing a badge they could buy at a costume shop, checking briefcases and waving a wand at senior citizens who set off the sensor because of their hip replacements. They're not entirely wrong about what some federal security looks like. They're entirely wrong about me. The gathering was a birthday party for my grandmother. She turned 82 in October, and my Aunt Roslyn had rented out the back room of an Italian restaurant in her neighborhood and invited what felt like everyone who had ever known our family, including several people I didn't recognize and one man who, I'm fairly certain, had the wrong party entirely but was having a wonderful time. I had driven 3 hours to be there. I want that to be noted. 3 hours. On a Friday evening. After a week that I cannot describe in any detail except to say that I had slept a combined total of 9 hours across 5 days, and 2 of those hours were in a government vehicle in a parking garage in a city I was not supposed to be in. I had pressed my clothes, brought a card with $100 in it, and shown up with a smile. And within 40 minutes, Angela had located the opportunity to remind the table what she thought of me. It had started innocuously enough. My cousin Derek, Angela's husband, had been talking about his promotion at the financial firm where he works. Managing director. It was legitimate, and I congratulated him genuinely, because Derek has always worked hard, and I've never had any issue with Derek. The problem was what came next. Angela, who has a gift for turning other people's achievements into measuring sticks, looked around the table with that particular brightness in her eyes and said, "It's so nice when people reach their potential, you know?" She let that sit for a moment. Then she looked at me. Not pointed, not cruel, technically. Just looked. And said, "Marcus, you've been at your job a long time now, right? Like 12 years. About that," I said. "Still the same position?" I thought about how to answer that for a moment. The honest answer was complicated in ways I couldn't explain. So I said, "More or less." She nodded with that smile. "That's okay. Not everyone needs to climb the ladder. Some people are just comfortable where they are." My mother said, "Angela." "I'm not being mean," Angela said immediately. "I mean it. There's honor in any job, even security work." She looked at me again. "It pays okay, right? For what it is. For what it is." I looked at her. She held my gaze for exactly as long as it took to make her point, and then she looked away. Dinner came. The conversation moved on to other things. Derek's new car, my cousin Brianna's kids, my grandmother's plans to finally take the trip to Portugal she'd been discussing for a decade. My grandmother was the only person at that table who had never once made me feel like a footnote, and I sat beside her, and we talked about Portugal for 20 minutes, and it was the best part of my evening by a significant margin. Around 8 o'clock, I excused myself to use the restroom. My phone had been vibrating in my pocket with a frequency and pattern that I recognized. In the hallway outside the private room, I looked at the screen. 14 messages, 3 missed calls, 1 flagged alert from a number that only activates in specific operational circumstances. I stood very still in the hallway for a moment. Then I made a call. When I came back to the table, I was quieter than I had been before. I don't think most people noticed. My mother noticed. She has always been able to read me with an accuracy that I find both comforting and inconvenient. She looked at me when I sat down, and I gave her a small nod that meant I'm fine. Don't ask.
She didn't ask.
Angela noticed too, in the way that people notice things they plan to use later. She made a small comment about how security people were always on call. The word security delivered with a gentle emphasis, like a thumb pressed lightly on a bruise. I smiled at my grandmother and asked her if she had looked into flights yet. The call came at 8:47. I know the time because I checked my watch when I felt the specific vibration pattern. Not a message. Not a standard call. The alert tone I had configured 3 years ago for exactly one category of incoming contact. I looked at the screen. I stood up without rushing. I said, "Excuse me," to no one in particular. Angela was mid-sentence about something, and I could feel her watching me leave the room with the satisfied expression of someone who interprets a person's phone as confirmation of their low status. I went to the hallway. I answered. The voice on the line was one I had been briefed to expect, but had never received directly before. Clear, controlled, carrying the particular cadence of someone who gives instructions that other people do not question. "I need you patched through to your deputy. Directly. We have a situation and I need verification of chain of custody on the Carlin documentation before the next 6 hours." I said, "Yes, sir." One moment. I made the connection. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. I spoke twice, both times in response to specific questions, both times in the careful, precise language of someone who knows that what they say will be documented, reviewed, and possibly referenced in a proceeding they cannot discuss in a restaurant hallway. When it was done, I put the phone in my pocket. I stood in the hallway for a moment. Then I straightened my jacket and went back to the table. I don't know exactly what happened in the 90 seconds between when I answered the call and when I walked back in. My brother Kevin told me later, in the parking lot, that Angela had said something about how I was probably calling in sick to my shift, and my uncle had laughed, and then the hallway door had been open long enough that the word director had carried. Just that word. But Kevin said the way it landed, the tone behind it, the clipped federal formality of the voice on the other end, had changed something. He said Angela had stopped laughing first. He said the table had gone quiet in the way it goes quiet when people are trying to process something that doesn't fit the story they've been telling. When I walked back in, I didn't look at anyone differently than I had before. I sat down. I picked up my water glass. My grandmother was telling a story about her sister that I had heard before and loved every time. I gave her my full attention. Angela tried once to address it. Not directly. That's not how Angela operates. She waited until dessert was being passed and then said, in the tone of someone making casual dinner conversation, "Was that work, Marcus? Everything okay?"
"Fine," I said.
"Just something that needed to be handled." I thought I heard," she stopped. Adjusted. It sounded like an important call.
It was.
She waited. I didn't continue. My uncle said, "What exactly do you do, Marcus?" "I don't think I've ever federal security, but..." "I can't talk about most of it," I said. Not defensively, just factually. The way I would tell someone I couldn't discuss a medical record. It's not a refusal. It's a category. The table went quiet in a different way than it had all evening. Not the comfortable quiet of people who think they understand the room. The other kind. The kind that happens when people become aware, for the first time, that there is a room they were never seeing. My grandmother patted my hand. She's the only person in my family who has never asked me a single question about my work. Not once in 12 years. I used to wonder if it bothered her. Then she said to me once, at a Christmas dinner about 5 years ago, "Marcus, I don't need to know what you do. I know who you are. That's the only thing that's ever mattered to me." I had to excuse myself after that too, for different reasons. She patted my hand and said, "Portugal. I was thinking October next year. Would you come?" "I'll do everything I can," I said. She smiled. "That's all anyone can do." Kevin caught me in the parking lot while I was warming up my car. He knocked on the window, and I rolled it down, and he looked at me for a moment with an expression I hadn't seen on his face since we were children. Something open, a little uncertain. The face he used to make when he realized he'd been wrong about something and was trying to decide what to do about it. He said, "That was the FBI director." It wasn't a question. I looked at him. He said, "You didn't tell us." "You didn't ask," I said. "Not really. You all decided a long time ago what I was, and I never had a reason to correct it." Kevin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What are you, Marcus?" I thought about how to answer that. About 12 years of work I couldn't describe. About cases that didn't have names in any public record. About the 14 messages and the 3 missed calls and 4 minutes in a hallway that represented something that would matter to people I would never meet. "I'm someone who does important work quietly," I said. "That's all I can tell you." He nodded slowly. He stood there for another moment, his breath fogging in the October cold, and then he said, "Angela is going to have a hard time with this." "She'll be fine," I said. "People adjust." I said goodnight to my brother, and I drove 3 hours home, and I was back at my desk by 6 the next morning. There is something I want to say about assumptions. Not to Angela specifically. To anyone who has ever stood in a room and looked at another person and felt the easy comfort of believing they understood what they were seeing. We build categories for people. We build them quickly, and we build them to last, because uncertainty is exhausting and certainty is comfortable. We look at someone's job title, their car, their apartment, the way they deflect questions at family dinners, and we construct a person out of those materials, and we are confident in what we've built. We are wrong more often than we know. The person who fixes your building's elevator might be putting herself through law school at night. The man who parks your car might be sending every extra dollar home to a family that depends on him in ways that would humble you. The woman who processes your paperwork might be the single reason a case doesn't fall apart, might be the invisible hinge on which something enormous turns, and she will never tell you because the work requires that she doesn't. And the person your family dismisses at the dinner table as just security staff might be the deputy the FBI director needs to reach in the next 6 hours. Might have always been that person. While you were smiling. 3 weeks after my grandmother's party, the Carlin case closed. I got a note. Formal, brief, the kind of language that federal acknowledgement uses, because it cannot say more than it says. I put it in the filing cabinet in my home office, the one that is locked with a key I keep on my person at all times. My grandmother called me the same week. She had found flights to Lisbon. She said, "October of next year. Mark your calendar." I already have. I laughed for the first time in what felt like a long time. "It's marked," I said. She said, "Good. Bring comfortable shoes. We're going to walk everywhere." I think about Angela's face sometimes. Not with anger.
I want to be clear about that.
I don't carry the dinner table with me the way I might have when I was younger, when the need to be understood by people who weren't paying attention still felt urgent. I think about her face because it's a useful reminder of how confidently people believe what they can see, of how much exists outside the frame, of how the work that holds things together is almost never the work that gets announced at dinner. The next time my family gathered, Thanksgiving, 2 months later, something had shifted. It was subtle. The kind of shift that doesn't get discussed directly, because acknowledging it would require acknowledging what preceded it. Derek asked me thoughtful questions about my work and accepted, without pushing, when I said I couldn't go into detail. My uncle, who had spent years treating me as the family's mild disappointment, sat near me after dinner, and talked about things that had nothing to do with status or achievement. Just talked. Like two people. Angela and I were civil. We are always civil. But she was quieter around me in a way that I understood, without either of us having to name it. My grandmother sat in the good chair by the window and watched everyone with the calm satisfaction of a woman who has always known more about her family than her family suspects, and at one point she caught my eye across the room and smiled. Just smiled. The way someone smiles when they've known something for a long time and they're glad the room is finally catching up. People spend a great deal of energy announcing who they are. The title,
The salary.
the address, the name they drop into conversation like a hand of cards laid on the table. What I've learned in 12 years of doing work I cannot describe to people I love is that the most significant things in any room are usually the quietest. The person you think you understand. The call you almost didn't notice. The 4 minutes in a hallway that changed something enormous, somewhere, for someone who will never know your name. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just sits at the table, drinks its water, and waits for the room to catch up.